In today's video, I'm sharing 9 podcasting tips that won't work in 2025 and what to do instead.
Welcome to Done by Lunch Entrepreneurs.
Where every episode is designed to help you run and grow your business in half the time. Oh wait, are you done?
So you can move on to other things that give you purpose.
Believe it or not, Apple Podcasts, which was really the beginning of podcasting, was started in 2005, which means we are hitting the 20-year anniversary. That means that the internet is full of outdated information for people doing podcasts. So I want to loop you in on the same things that we are discovering and sharing with our private clients to make sure your strategy for 2025 is up to date, and more importantly, to make sure you're not wasting time on things that don't work anymore. Plus, I know a lot of audio podcasters are video curious, let's say. And so at the end, I'm going to share the weird reason why video podcasts can actually take less time than audio only podcasts. So if you're thinking about video podcasting, make sure to listen for that. By the way, my name is Jerry Potter. Yes, it rhymes with the boy wizard. And let's jump into 9 podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 1, focusing exclusively on Apple. For a lot of years, Apple was the main podcasting app and the majority of listening happened there. So people really doubled down on that as part of their strategy. But Spotify now has huge market share for podcasts, and YouTube was just named the #1 platform for podcast discovery and consumption. So there are lots of different players in the game. We can't just focus on Apple anymore. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 2, focusing only on quality and waiting to be discovered. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups about podcasting. Whenever someone says, hey, do you have any growth tips? The comments fill up with people saying, just focus on quality and your audience will find you. And yeah, there's a chance of that, but I'm not that patient. It's so easy now to take a clip of your podcast, put it on social media as a short form video, that's Facebook and Instagram Reels, TikToks, YouTube Shorts, or vertical videos on LinkedIn, and reach people who don't know who you are yet. This clip from my podcast reached over 22,000 people who had no idea who I was and brought me new clients and listeners. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 3, focusing only on audio. Now, I know the audio purists will sometimes even say, if it's video, it's not a podcast. Here's what you should know. Audio is not going anywhere. Audio is great. I love the audio part of my podcast, but 31% of podcast listeners say they discover their new shows on YouTube. That's higher than Apple and Spotify, the other 2 big players in the game. And among new podcast listeners, these are people who have just started listening to podcasts in the last year, 40% of them prefer video. I was shocked by this because I don't watch video podcasts. If there's an audio option, I will always choose that. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 4, really long podcast intros. There are obviously way more podcasts than there used to be, which means the quality's got to be better to hold people's attention. So we can't be making somebody sit through a 45 to 60 second intro every time they come into our show. We tell our clients 15 to 20 seconds max, which can be a challenge, but the intro for this podcast is 9 seconds. I played it for you earlier in this video. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 5, not repeating topics. Let me tell you what I mean by that one, because that's a little bit weird. But once upon a time, people would listen to every episode of a podcast. Almost nobody does that anymore. If you have a podcast, odds are the only person who's heard every episode is you and maybe a co-host or a producer if you have one. So we should be looking at our top performing episodes and making more just like it instead of feeling like, oh, we've got to reinvent the wheel every time. This is especially true if your podcast is for your business like mine is, where we want to be talking about the most important, most impactful topics that will convert listeners into buyers as much as possible. All right, next, 4 more podcasting tips that won't work in 2025, including one about monetization strategies. We're doing 9 of these podcasting tips that won't work in 2025, and number 6 is weekly episodes. So when podcasting first started, there weren't that many. By having a weekly episode, you could become part of somebody's routine. They wake up on Tuesday morning, they know that their favorite podcast episode is there, and they listen to it on their workout or on their way to work. But things have changed. Most people don't listen to every episode of a show, so we are better off publishing, let's say, every other week and making our episodes that much better. Not to mention, having to keep up with a weekly schedule leads to a lot of podcaster burnout. So here's your permission to not publish every week if it's lowering the quality of your episodes. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025: really long episodes for brand new shows. So we look at some of the biggest shows on the planet, and they're an hour and a half. If you are a podcast listener, your favorite show might be that long. But just a moment ago, we were talking about becoming a habit in somebody's life. It's really hard as a new show to become a habit if your show is an hour to an hour and a half long. So I think with very few exceptions, we're going to see shorter episodes and shorter shows performing and growing much, much faster. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025: using your guests to grow your audience. So sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to have interviews and then they're going to promote it to their audience. But unfortunately, with so many podcasts, here's what usually happens. If you get a guest with a big audience, awesome. But odds are they get on a lot of podcasts and they're not going to be able to promote yours at all. One more, and in just a second, why video podcasts can take less time to create than audio-only podcasts. Podcasting tips that won't work in 2025. Number 9, focusing on downloads for monetization. So traditionally, you've had to build up to 5,000 to 10,000 downloads per episode in the first 30 days, attract sponsors to monetize. But now, anybody with a podcast can sell their own stuff. This is why, as an entrepreneur with a podcast, I don't consider myself a podcaster, I'm an entrepreneur with a podcast, I can monetize from the first episode. Same thing with all of our clients who are doing the same thing. Because if you make content for your perfect person and then you invite them to work with you, some of them are going to say yes. There are lots of people making thousands of dollars in their business per episode, even if they've only got 50 or so downloads. By the way, if you're an entrepreneur who has a podcast or you're thinking about starting a podcast, especially on YouTube, I have a free masterclass. We'll show you the secret to planning a show that gets results from the very first episode, even with a small audience, how to get YouTube to recommend your episodes, even if you're a small channel, and lots more. We've got the link for it in the description of this video. You can sign up in seconds, and I'd love to show you how to do this stuff for free. So how in the world can a video podcast take less time to create than an audio-only podcast? So audio podcasters proudly get to record audio only for each episode without having to feel camera ready, right? And a video podcaster has to record video and audio simultaneously for each episode. So I always tell my clients, you do have to shower at least once a month to be camera ready, and then you can do all of your episodes. Audio podcasters use a transcript-based editor like Descript to quickly edit and publish each episode. Same for video podcasters. The editing can take about the same amount of time, but this is where the difference is. Audio podcasters often then get camera ready to record a bunch of social media content to promote their podcast and achieve other business objectives. But as video podcasters, again, we don't have to shower for 29 days because all of our social media content can come right out of our podcast. Again, to be clear, we do encourage showering. We're just saying you don't have to be camera ready except once a month. Hey, which of these was most helpful? Will you let me know in the comments? It would mean a lot. I'm definitely curious. And in the description of this video, remember, you can take that masterclass I'm teaching to teach you more of this stuff absolutely free. Find the link by clicking more down below. We'll see you in the next video.